Welcome to Hell of a Picture. Come on, join us. Hell of a Picture. Terrible, Arnold.
What you were doing there? You were prepping for something there. I could see it. I was like, "What is he doing?" And then, bam! He hits us with the opening Arnie. Oh my God, fabulous.
My name is Andrew Bartlett, and I'm sitting across the internet as I do for every week from my dear friend, Mr. David Hollingsworth. How you doing, buddy?
Oh man, I'm doing great now. You really you got us off to a cracking start with opening Arnie. So I'm feeling good.
My terrible Arnold.
Nah, dude, your Arnie is bang on. No, I am ready to come on and get into Total Recall. That's right.
Arnie.
You want a bad Arnie? I got bad Arnie.
Yeah, come on. This week, you said it. We're doing Total Recall. The 1990 Paul Verhoeven sci-fi weird cyberpunk classic. And we're continuing our little run here of like reality-based films, like sci-fi films that are sort of, play with the audience's perception, character's perception of reality, but then also sort of leave the audience guessing a bit. And yeah, Total Recall. This was a banger in the 90s, and we have a lot of thoughts on this, and we're gonna figure out if it's a hell of a picture. And yeah, we can just dive right into it, Dave. We can go right into unless you want anything else you want to touch on before we kind of get into our discussion on Total Recall.
No, I don't think we should tarry. This is a big one. I think more than might surprise little people just how in depth you can go on Total Recall. So I say we come on and get right to it.
Get to the rundown. Get to the rundown. Come on, the rundown. Let's go.
So, the rundown. So Total Recall takes place in the year 2084, a future where vacations can be taken via memory implant and cabs are driven by weird torsos. We meet Doug Quaid, a shockingly buff everyman who dreams of more than a construction job and his supermodel wife. Doug wants his life to mean something, and for reasons he can't explain, that involves Mars. When a real trip to the red planet seems unlikely, Doug tries his hand, or his head, at Recall, signing up for the Ego Trip Package, a fantasy upgrade to his memory vacation where Doug will play the part of a secret agent engaged in a harrowing mission on Mars. But when the electrodes touch Temple, something goes terribly wrong. Doug freaks out. Big time. As only Arnie can, really. When he comes to after the incident, Doug finds himself embroiled in a world of spies and murder, similar to the one he was meant to experience in his Recall vacation. A team of armed operatives is out to get him, everyone in his life is playing him false, and suddenly he is really good at snapping necks. After evading capture and the repeated groin shots delivered by his fake wife Lori, Doug heads for Mars, a planet locked in a state of unrest as terrorists grapple with authoritarian rule. Quaid is caught between the two factions as he learns that he used to be Carl Howser, an agent in the employ of Velos Cohagen, who rules Mars with an iron fist. Did Quaid turn coat, or is this just another layer of cloak and dagger designed to undermine the rebellion? Is Doug lost in a synaptic sojourn, or is this fantasy as real as it gets? These are the questions. Total Recall was, of course, released in June of 1990 and directed by Paul Verhoeven, the man who brought behind such other movies as RoboCop, Starship Troopers, and Basic Instinct. It was adapted from the novelette We Can Remember It For You Wholesale by Philip K. Dick, which was first published in the magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction in 1966. It stars, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger as Douglas Quaid, Sharon Stone as Lori Quaid, Michael Ironside as Richter, Rachel Ticotin, I apologize to Rachel if I mispronounced that, as Melina, and finally Ronnie Cox as Velos Cohagen. The film cost somewhere between $50 and $80 million and brought in around $260 million, making it the fifth highest grossing film of 1990. Total Recall was nominated for 3 Academy Awards: Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects, winning for this last one. The movie was an overwhelming success with audiences, but critics were divided. Some praised its ideals, effects, and even Arnie's performance, while others derided the film's gratuitous violence and Schwarzenegger in equal measure, with one reviewer going so far as to acerbically describe him as, and I'm quoting here, unusually oafish, a cross between Frankenstein's monster, a hockey puck, and Colonel Klink. And I tell you, I don't need to agree with something to appreciate it. That is a very fine turn of phrase. And that is your rundown.
Ooh, wee. I love it.
Yeah.
Man,
Frankenstein's monster, a hockey puck, and Colonel
like,
Klink.
is that supposed to like infer that like a hockey puck is just like an inanimate object, or like I don't like.
I think he probably has the emotional range or expression of a hockey puck. He is as
so random.
Yeah, is unable to emote as a hockey puck. It's good. I think that's some really fine word choices there. Very funny, very very cutting. Maybe unfair to Arnie. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think he's actually. Well, we'll get into our thoughts on his performance in this film, but a really great turn of phrase. Whoever wrote that, kudos to them.
Certainly. So this is a movie that you've revisited a ton, right? Like you watch this fairly regularly.
Yeah. This one, it's in my rotation for sure.
Yeah. So for me, I couldn't even remember the last time I seen it. I've seen it, and I think I've maybe seen it once. It's one of those movies for me that's like, oh yeah, like I've seen Total Recall, or I recall Total Recall, and you're sort of, I'm rewatching it and I'm like, man, I don't remember any of this. And it's like, It's been so long since I've seen it. I think I saw it like back when I was a teenager, and it's like the iconic scenes that are sort of related to the film, the effects scenes and the 3 boobs and all that sort of stuff. Like that sort of sticks out in your head and you remember those. Yeah. But when it comes to like the actual film, like I'm like, oh, right. Like, I don't know if I was like mixing it up with other films or whatever, but like, yeah, it has been a long time. So this feels really fresh and new to me. And it's something that you're very familiar with. So this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can hop into, coming off of The Matrix last week, where, there's such a unique look to it. And, I referenced sort of off the top cyberpunk feel. This is obviously a strong influence for The Matrix, not just with the content or the story or sort of the reality-based idea, but also just like visually, Jesus, how it looks. And that's sort of like, we can start with just like the sets. And this was sort of a film that was shot, I think, completely on sound stages and like built sets. So there's no like sort of like practical like locations. It was all like sort of built sets in these big studio warehouses in Mexico. And interesting thing, like a lot of like the sets for the subway and the underground stuff, they were actually like connected with like tunnels, and they used those tunnels when they were filming. They just sort of like used all these huge locations and sound stages, which was pretty interesting. Was that something that you feel like holds up today? Because like a lot of movies today, they don't use, besides the green screen stuff, a lot of building huge sets is there's more of like practical finding places a lot of times. Do you find that this still holds up today? Do you think the sets still work as they did 30 years ago?
Absolutely. It was like on this rewatch, and it had probably been, like I say, I watched this movie quite a bit, but like it might have been a couple of years since I've seen it, maybe a year, something like that. But it is something right. I watched for sure. But on this watch through, like taking a critical eye to it, one of the things that really caught my eye were the sets. And yeah, you nailed it. Like, I mean, they do a lot of this, most of this on sound stages. There were 35 unique sets across 8 sound stages. And like you pointed out, they built tunnels connecting all of these sound stages. So when you see them on chase scenes moving from place to place, that's being shot as it, like, you know, as is. Like, they are running from, you know, the spaceport to the bar to the resistance hideout, and all of that is on film, and they're doing it across, like, through this network that they've created. And yeah, I mean, I thought that was so cool. You know, you think like there would be, you know, sort of like with all the chasing, there'd be this recurrence, a recycling of hallways or of location. Like, no, everything feels like it's the first. Like, when you go to a place, it feels like the first time you're there, and that's actually true.
Yeah.
It is the first time because all of these were uniquely created. And man, yeah, does it still work for me? 100%, it still does. I loved it, and everything felt lived in. There was little details here and there, like posters peeling off the wall, bits of graffiti. Stuff looked clean where it ought to look clean, and grimy where it should look grimy. I thought it was fantastic. And just continuing with that sort of technical work, you know, there was a lot of miniatures used in this. And even, like, you know, we talked about the scale of the sets, but even the miniatures in this movie were huge. The alien reactor set completely filled a room with 25-foot ceilings. They built it vertically and just took up every inch they could. And like the exterior Martian shots, they built a 14-foot tall, 14-foot diameter mountain. And I still like those sort of sweeping shots of the Martian terrain. I do think maybe that's one place where CGI has rightly supplanted the older methods, but I still like it. Like, I mean, do you, like, what are your thoughts on those? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like those wild, like, whooshing around, like, outdoor shots.
Yeah, those are wild. The whooshing shots. The interesting that this is sort of, I mean, it uses some computer special effects, like very minimal, but this was sort of like, you know, they were sort of saying this was sort of the last hurrah with sci-fi with like practicals. When it comes to the miniatures, comes to the sets, you know, we touched on this with Jurassic Park. You know, they use practicals, but they're also, it was like sort of 50-50 practicals. And then it was also CGI. You know, you got Terminator 2 a couple of years later, and that is sort of like this new development of CGI and how they're, you know, using, you know, computers to make these really cool effects. This was sort of the last hurrah, I think, Total Recall. And, you know, how I feel about practicals versus CGI. Like, I always lean towards the practicals, and that's I mean, that's to be expected too with like even the prosthetics and the makeup. There's something kitschy about it. There's something like, you know, it looks a bit. I don't want to use the word grimy, but it looks a bit like. I mean, inauthentic, I guess, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I feel like there's a nostalgic feel to it, even though it's something that's based in the future. Like, I think about the sort of, you know, the very obvious makeup effects that were used with like the mutant rebellion, you know, where it's sort of that like creature growing out of the stomach, and it gave me feels of The Thing, which is the guy who, the character, the special effects makeup artist in this. His name, what? Rob
Bottin? Yeah, Bottin, I think his name. Bottin. Yeah, he was on RoboCop with Verhoeven as well, and he did The Thing. No, that's John Carpenter, right?
Yeah, man, we should talk about The Thing. The Thing is
I'd be down with that.
Pretty amazing, and yeah, a lot of similar sort of these wild, crazy sort of effects that are, there's something tactile about them, right? And like even when they're sort of you see it at the opening scene of the film when they're, you know, he has the dream sequence and he's rolling down the hill and his space mask bursts open and his eyes are coming out, and it's like, all, you know, those were prosthetics of like Arnie's head, and like they're blowing it up, and it's like there's something authentic about it. And that's sort of, for me, I always lean towards that. And that's why I thought, like, yeah, there were some that you're just kind of like, that's like, you know, like the guy with the I don't know if he has a name, the character with like his name Tom, with like the hat, the alien guy who's like, you know, like you like you got real gumption, like showing your face and hair.
Oh, Tony. Yeah, Tony.
Like, Tony, not Tom. Tony. Yeah.
Look,
it's like
look
that
who's
sort of,
talking.
you know. Yeah. He's like, yeah. It's like, that stuff, you know, looks a bit, but like again, it's a different time, and I think that stuff, that stuff still works.
Yeah, there is the occasional bit of things that are maybe a tad dated, but on the whole, the Monstercraft, all the prosthetics that you talk about, man, they still really work for me. Like you mentioned those decompression scenes, you know, sort of where like Arnie, you know, at the beginning when the mask breaks, and so they're exposed to the zero pressure environment of Mars, and so their faces are swelling up and stretching, and so yeah, like they made full size bladders basically that were stretched over top of mechanical skeletons, and the expansion was controlled with either cables, so you could like pull one and, you know, your eyes would blow up, or like, you know, there was cables, and then there was pipes too, so you have like crew blowing into pipes, and you know, it would control different facial features, and they even sculpted like muscles and tendons that you don't really see. They're underneath the skin, but it creates like this effect of verisimilitude. And there's a whole network of miniature motors and gears, and to make everything look as natural as possible. And I love that. And you talked about you know, Quado, the mutant, just sort of the vestigial mutant coming out of you know, that guy's belly.
Yes,
that was a full body prosthetic that required 15 puppeteers to operate. And the guy who played George, you know, sort of the human half of that dyad. Yeah, Marshall Bell was his name. He spent 9 hours in makeup for the Quado scenes, and initially there was no way for him to go to the bathroom once he was in that. So he lobbied successfully to get a pee hole cut into the suit. Thank God. But that's a tough gig right there.
And that is just like literally torture, like sitting there for 9 hours getting these, like, and that stuff is heavy as all hell. You have wires coming out of you. You have like people control. It's like that is so rough. There's an interesting interview with Jim Carrey, who talks about the Grinch, and when he did the Grinch, he like he had, you know, he didn't have 9 hours, but he had something like, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours or something of makeup like every single day, and he said it was like torture, like literal torture.
I believe it.
And you know, and it's so like props to those actors who have to kind of sit through makeup, you know, to get some
for the craft, for the love of the craft.
Absolutely. There's so there, I mean, there's one more thing that we want to touch on, and I guess when it comes to like that aspect of it, and that's the three-breasted woman. That's I already mentioned it. It's probably one of the more iconic like moments in the whole film. Like that's what you think about when you think about Total Recall.
It is the stuff of legend. You're right. I think I probably heard about that before I even ever saw the movie. Like, I mean, did you like hear about that on the school ground? I feel like that was the kind of thing that like young boys would sort of pass around, like some kind of lore. You know what I mean? Did you hear about it that way?
Oh yeah. And it's like you finally sort of see it. I mean, like it looks impressive, and they look pretty real in you know. The poor
and they're fantastic. They're real. And
they're real and they're spectacular. The poor actor who played that, like, apparently she was just couldn't get away from it. Couldn't, like, you know, like just got like not ridiculed, but like just like harassed about this for like years and years. So I mean. It certainly isn't a, but I guess you gotta, like, you know, I think after eventually she accepted it, sort of, but yeah,
Hope so.
It's just like these
hopefully
wonky.
It's like Jamin, you know.
The old Jamin from The Rock.
She embraces it.
You just accept who you are, but yeah, there's a. But that the I don't know, it's fun, interesting, unique choices that make this movie memorable, and that's definitely one of them.
For sure. And again, like that's the same guy in his team, Botten, and he talked about how real they looked, and he was insistent on that. that they give the genuine impression of being affected by gravity. That was his words. And another interesting thing that I found, initially she was supposed to have 4, and apparently this is something that Arnie was pushing for. He wanted 4. It's never enough for Arnie. He wants 4 breasts, But audience research suggested that 4 breasts made her more reminiscent of a cow, and as a result, not sexy. So just to confirm here, research tells us that 3 breasts is sexy, 4 breasts is weird. So that's that was a fun bit of information, that I pulled from there. I mean, it's I think they got it right there. Before we move on from the prosthetics and stuff like that, we would be remiss, I think, if we didn't talk about the fat lady scene. And I remember this. This is a violent movie, but like, that scene actually unsettled me more than any other when I was a kid. The freak out that precedes the reveal is very upsetting and effective because it's upsetting. The work they put into this is astounding. First of all, finding an actress with the necessary proportions was tricky. Then there were a bunch of iterations of the mask. And again, difficulties with proportionality to both Arnie and the actress. Priscilla Allen was her name. At first, they were going to have these things being supported by the actors, like they were just going to sort of pop it on. But by the time they got everything working, the mechanisms become so complex that it actually weighed about 70 pounds. So for a lot of these shots, like, the mask is just sitting on top of a prop torso, and the movement you see is facilitated by linear motion bearings powered by hydraulics. So when you see all those segments like opening and closing and like remeshing, and you're seeing a real piece of extraordinary engineering. And there's a much longer, more detailed account of how this was done, with all the different iterations they went through. And if you're interested, go read on it, because it's actually, it's a really cool sort of look at the process of technical movie making. And I thought that was just, super cool. Well,
that's the other iconic.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Scene, right? Yeah, that's the other iconic scene, right? Like that. You think about the 3-breasted woman, for me anyway, and then you think about that bald shot of her, and just like it opening up and Arnie kind of coming out, and like her like freaking out, right? It is like you said, it is iconic and memorable, just very memorable.
Super, yeah. Enough with the fat lady. You're obsessed with the fat lady.
Move on from the fat lady.
We'll call back to Goldblum.
But Arnie, this movie as a whole, it obviously has a pretty strong cult following. It did, like you mentioned, it was successful at the box office. It sort of had this still innovative like use of CGI or of makeup or prosthetics of even the sci-fi story and the sets. But like, this was a movie that was like a long time trying to get made. And like, there were a lot of other people like connected to direct it. It was sort of years trying to get off the ground. David Cronenberg was originally going to direct for like a long time. And disagreements on sort of the lead, and Arnie sort of, I guess, eventually found the script and he shopped it around, and he wanted Paul Verhoeven after seeing RoboCop. RoboCop, I don't know. Have you seen RoboCop lately in the past few years?
Yes. Yeah, probably in the past months actually, but it had been a while.
Dude, that movie is so fucking good. And it is like, he has a run, Paul Verhoeven, of like the 90s, in the 90s, he's such an interesting actor or such an interesting director. He has this run of like 5 iconic movies in the 90s. And like all of them for different varying reasons. Like they're not sort of would be considered the greatest of all time or anything like that, but they are just like in their field, they're just like revolutionary in what they did. Like so he starts with RoboCop, I guess 90s. He did RoboCop in 87. So he starts with RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, Showgirls, and then Starship Troopers. Now Basic Instinct and Showgirls is obviously a bit different, but they're still iconic, right? Those are like, and like, say what you will about Showgirls, that was like just like such a huge, massive, big deal when that came out. And still, like after all these years, sort of like the cultural impact of these movies. Verhoeven is really unique in that way. And then he kind of like makes a movie every like 4 or 5 years. And he's still sort of working now, but he's not really, he sort of hasn't, I guess, hit the same plateau as he did when he was making sort of these run of movies. But like I said, like he's sort of this is his peak run of these sort of 5 years, ending with sort of Starship Troopers in 97.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen 3 of his films. 3 of the ones that you mentioned there, like the RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers sort of sequence. And they all share a commonality in that they're science fiction, they're action, and they contain really great satire inside a viable commercial package. And, you know, one of the things he's criticized for as a filmmaker is violence. It's been called excessive and gratuitous, but it always seems to me very purposeful and a tool for commentary. It's often so over the top that I feel like he's demanding we focus on it and we consider it. And you see it in RoboCop a lot and in Total Recall, especially there's this human shield scene. So Quaid is on the run from Richter. He's coming up an elevator. The goons are coming down. And he grabs this random guy just as they open fire. And this poor guy just gets lit the fuck up. Like, peppered with bullets, just like completely like, you know, just perforated. And then he turns around because there's more guys coming up. And so he whips the guy around and then he gets drilled again. And he now takes this corpse that is littered with bullets and just chucks it at the guys. and then in a final insult, the body gets trod upon by everybody as they carry on running and shooting. And it's so silly, but there's something to that. Like, I mean, this is the kind of attitude that both heroes and villains have towards like sort of the regular person in film and in real life. You know, like you use them as fodder, you hurl their corpse, and you move on. And I love the comment. I love the way it's stated. It reminds me a bit about how we talked about the dangers of messiahs last week in The Matrix, and how that can really extend to any hero or anybody who fancies themselves the main character in the story, which you said last week is most, if not all of us. We all think of ourselves that way. And it's not good because you're just chucking corpses of regular people, you know? I mean, these are people too. This guy's probably got a story. We'll never know.
He is. Yeah, isn't there's a scene in RoboCop too where they have like the guy gets absolutely, he's more of a character though, I think, in RoboCop. The guy that gets,
but it is very heightened. There's a very heightened sort of like almost hysteric scene of violence. I think when Murphy dies, you know, like, I mean, like the way they shoot him.
Yes.
It's just like he's been dead for 5 minutes. They're still just pumping him full of bullets. And RoboCop is a lot about how we, as like a society, kind of like process violence and like how it's okay in some ways and just totally not in other ways. We have this weird dichotic relationship with violence. And I think you get a bit of that here too.
But that's what I think is so unique about the film. And that's what I think it doesn't hide its violence and it kind of like puts it on display. And I think that's like such a, I don't know, like it's almost like again, I use the word cyberpunk, but like punk rock, just like badass, like just like these like gratuitous blood and
Mm.
violence. And it's like, it's so over the top that it's like you said, it's satirical. It's, I think it's supposed to be like that. I don't think in his mind, the filmmakers are thinking like, okay, like, this is like gratuitous, or this isn't, this is like, that's the whole point. And that's, and what's so great about it in this story is it plays to the story, right?
Yes.
The story itself obviously is an interesting discussion, and this idea of, like you just mentioned, being the hero and the hero of your own story, or being a hero in a story. And this is sort of what's Quaid sort of decides to do. He's going to get this recall, get this memory, and be a secret agent. This is, again, this is sort of the idea of what is real and what is a dream. And that's sort of what we've been talking about with all these movies. I want to pivot and ask you with that, like, first of all, what do you think it is? You think it's a dream, or you think it's reality? What do you think? Just curious.
I I think it's real. I think so. I think yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe you disagree. You think, or do you
No,
think
no,
it's just a little ambiguous?
well, I mean, that's the whole point of it, is to be ambiguous.
Yeah, sure.
It's sort of a trope that I don't know how much it was done before this. I'm trying to think of like, I'm sure it has, but like this
Yeah,
uh, ambiguous sort of, like, I guess, Blade Runner. Obviously, happens in sci-fi movies, but like, I guess,
and yeah, like in this, the source material for this is like from the '60s. So you got to figure at some point after after
yes,
Philip K. Dick wrote this, people, either whether he was the first one or not, not sure, but like certainly afterwards, I would say people emulated it. So like the whole idea of,
yes,
is it real? Is it not?
yeah,
Like, is it a dream? Is it a simulation? Yeah, it's probably been done a fair bit, and you can see why. It's an interesting discussion,
yeah,
and really effective.
yeah. I think
So much of the
initially,
movie. Sorry, no, no, please go
yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, yeah. I
No,
was
no,
going to
all you,
say,
all you.
essentially the original script, I think, the original story, not the Philip K. Dick one, but the script, because there was like, I don't know how many iterations of the script. I think they said it was like 40 times this script was
Wow,
rewritten. Um,
man,
they had it more so that it was not ambiguous,
right?
and they had it more like, yes, this is real. This is like, it's very obviously real. But then, excuse me. They thought that, I think they, upon research or rewriting, it was just it was more interesting to make it more ambiguous, and especially with Arnie, because the interesting thing was, like, Arnie was such an action hero. He had done these sort of movies, he'd done a few movies before, obviously, where he's this massive action hero. He's a couple years from Terminator 2, which sort of changed the game when it comes to like action movies, and I guess sci-fi, but like global scale. Like, he was global, but I
Mm-hmm.
guess at this point, but it was like, he just like another tier. Like, he's the top biggest star in Hollywood. Um, and having that ambiguous ending, or just sort of this, like, whether it's a dream, whether it's a reality, kind of played against what people were used to seeing with him, I guess, and
Yes.
seeing him in a negative light, like when he sort of comes on and he's not Quaid anymore, but he's the I can't remember Howser. He's
Howser.
like, oh, it's like, yeah, he's like, you're Howser, and he's like, yeah, this was all a plan, and it's like, whoa, he's the bad guy. It's like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
that ambiguity is sort of what makes the film work on that reality side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, so much of this movie centers around the idea of memory and the past.
Yes.
And how it's remembered, how it's written, how it's documented. It's a huge supporting piece in our view of the present and our experienced reality. Our past only exists in memory. And so anything you've done or achieved is now only accessible in your mind or through any kind of lasting results of the event. Like if you brought something back from a vacation, an object or a scar or maybe a relationship.
Yes.
And so memory, whether experienced or implanted, is a part of our reality, as are any artifacts of the memory which support it. And so everything that makes Quaid the sort of the introductory character of Arnie, everything that makes him who he is derived from memory and the conspirators acting to support the memories. He never actually did anything outside of the last 6 weeks. That's the timeline we're given. He's been this guy for 6 weeks. That's what we find out eventually. And yet his world is defined by memories that date back as much as 8 years. That's how long he's been married to his wife. And he genuinely feels as though he is the fabricated person because of the sincerity of memory. And it makes you realize in a different way, but to a similar extent as The Matrix, that our notion of reality is pretty flimsy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Like it's hard to know. I mean, to be completely transparent, that's kind of my biggest fear. This is sort of all. This is all sort of a simulation. Nothing is real. I'm like, it's like, okay, I woke up today and all my memories, everything I've had, like everything is just implanted in my brain, and that's like. It's just like nothing is real. Like I'm just like me thinking about like, oh, this is a thought that I've had before. It's like that was implanted. Like all of that's like a real thing. And
and how would you know? Much like in this movie, how would you know? I mean, that's
how would you know?
And that's what sort of makes it so effective and so scary. There's
for me.
There's some. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, me, I think it's more of a. I probably lean towards more of it being a dream.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I just think lots of things sort of line up, and just like, even the scene with the doctor when the doctor comes in, it's like, and I am part of the dream, and I'm the dream. I am the safety net for the dream, and whatever. And he sees him sort of sweating, and it's like. That's obviously another cool wrinkle in a secret agent story or whatever. Sidebar, that actor, his name, I looked it up. It's like Roy Brocksmith. Roy Brocksmith is the doctor in his dream. He is in the Nose Job episode of Seinfeld as well.
Yep.
As the landlord.
He has a great voice. He's a great voice actor.
Yes, I remember Mrs. Kramer. Hideous woman. Kramer's
promiscuous.
Just infuriated with him. Promiscuous woman. Gentlemen callers coming in and out all the time. Yeah, he has such a unique. It's great. There's a great kind of like these sort of like run of the secondary characters in the movie is also like. Besides secondary, Michael Ironside is incredible. But Sharon Stone, what? She is amazing. Not like she is also she's fucking stunning. Like she's beautiful, but she's such a good actor too. And she's like she just plays this role so well. This sort of like. She's played it in other obviously in other films as well. But like, it's like you're so captivated by her, but also you like you also know she's probably gonna fuck you over.
Well, I mean, you bring that up, and there there are two parts to the whole mind job in this movie. And the first is obviously the scientific aspect, the manipulation of the brain and implanting the memories. But the second is more grounded. And it involves the people in Quaid's life and the agents put in place to distract him or aid him as necessary. And the
Yes.
movie does such a great job in showing how dependent we are on the people in our lives to define our reality. And Sharon Stone is, well, she's extraordinary, as you said. And the quick turn she makes in a couple of scenes, just like, how she'll like, it's like she's caught, she's been busted as, as duplicitous. And then she'll just revert right back to being his wife, Doug, honey. And man, she does that so well. And it shows how effectively we can be manipulated by people to whom we attach memory. Like she's using that, like, what he has, the fabricated, reality of his past against him, and she weaponizes it so well. And that can be done against all of us, to a really frightening degree. When you break down sort of the machinations of this movie, and this sort of ties into the role that all the conspirators play, it's pretty wild that it comes across as well as it does. There's a lot to the conspiracy that surrounds Quaid and Howser and Cohagen, and I won't bother reciting it now, but when you say it out loud, it's amazing that it works as well as it does. And if it is a bit confusing, that's all to the good, because this would be extremely confusing. Going back to the idea of identity, you wonder if Quaid, the decisions he makes, like, is he compelled to help the rebels because that was programmed into him, or did he naturally develop, sort of a moral compass in this kind of short 6-week gestation period? And this really touches on what makes us who we are. Is it our memories, or is it what we do? Do we do what we do only because of our memories? Without memory, what choices would we make? Like, and how else could they be influenced or informed?
Yeah.
If you imagine your mind, like, without experience or memory, what would it be? Like, you'd have no reference for any decision making or situation. Like, you wouldn't be a fully formed person in a lot of ways. It'd be like having an adult brain with, like, the programming of a child. And like you said, we've seen this done in other movies, I think, like, the whole amnesia thing, or, someone forgets who they are and they start to realize they have all these powers or whatever. But I don't think it's ever been done as well as it is here. It's certainly not in an action film.
I'm curious as to what you feel is the, like, so, you're talking about it being a, like, not knowing something, and then you get it sort of like revealed to you through, in this film anyway, through this process of recall. The one sort of question I had with that, with respect to, like, the process of recall and memory, and, like, because the key to this is, like you were mentioning, is the idea of memory, right? Like, you have this memory, or you want this memory, or you, like, get this memory implanted, versus, like, something like The Matrix, where it's like, is this reality real? It's not so much about memory in the past. It's about, like, what's happening right now. And this is, yes, there's, like, stuff that happened in the past, but it's like, what's happening to you at this particular moment. The one thing I find sort of a bit confusing in this is that, like, you go, Quaid goes to recall and he gets a memory implanted in his brain, but then he experiences the memory. So is this sort of like, this process, or this, like, recall, is it just implanting it, and then you would be like, oh yeah, like, I did that, but that's not really what it is. It's more so, it's like, you get to live this experience, and then when you come out of it, or do, like, in the moment, that you're in recall, I guess. Like, that's sort of I guess, and that's what makes sort of the story, I guess, interesting as well, because it is ambiguous and it doesn't really clarify that, right? Like, I'm not sure that I fully understand how the process of recall works. Can you fill me in?
I think Well, again, like you're right, it is a little unclear. I think the idea though is that normally if it worked as it's supposed to, you would go through the like you would go in for the treatment and you would just sort of then have be possessed of the memory. But I think with him the idea is that something goes wrong. Something happens. He has a
Right. Yeah.
schizoid
No. I get
embolism.
that.
So he gets trapped in there and he's sort of like
Right.
living it out and acting it out and kind of creating things on his own, but with the inspiration of what the memory was supposed to be. So I think in an ideal situation, you don't have this kind of virtual reality lived experience as he maybe goes through it.
Oh.
I think
Yes.
the
Okay.
intention, I think the actual intention, if it goes well, is that you just, go in 5 minutes procedure and then you have these memories and that is your takeaway. You don't necessarily get a lived in reality as much as what we see here. I think.
Right. So it's like for me, I can like remember. Oh, I remember when, whatever, when I moved away to Toronto for the first time.
Yes.
Just like random memory. And it's like I remember those sort of times, and I remember, okay, I was like whatever. I like moved up and I moved in with a buddy and then I moved in with my brother and then we got a place and I was working at a bar and I was doing whatever. I have all these thoughts. Recall, you get this sort of and then you're like, but like, does he come out and he's like, oh, I remember that I was a secret agent? Or is he like, I remember that I was a secret agent, but it's also like I did do recall. So it's just like an implanted memory, but I like remember it. Like, is that sort of what that's what would happen?
I think one of the things they mention is it happens pretty fast, but they talk about how something goes wrong in part because he has an existing memory in there of being Damar. So they're trying to like lay a fake memory over top of something real, and there's sort of those two things are at odds, and that's part of what sort of f things up a little bit. But the idea is that you just sort of come away with this kind of revenant of the experience,
Right.
which, when you think about your memory of Toronto and something, like you cannot relive that experience, like there is no means for you
Right.
to
Right.
even like you were there and you did it. But now at this point, it only exists in that sort of weird way
Right.
that we experience memory. And so that is what you would get in this sort of exchange. And
Right.
it's funny, we don't have we don't need to talk about this a ton, but there is this continued theme that we always seem to find in movies of the monetization or the commodification of things, and like they've fully commodified memories, like those scenes when he's in Recall and you have the salesman there and stuff like that, and he's just like, for a few more credits, and like it's always just tacking on like a few more credits, and there is this really interesting monetization of experience and of memory. And like the title of the original work is "We Can Remember It For You Wholesale." So obviously that is a big part, I think, of the source material, that comment on corporate influence. And that's a huge thing in RoboCop too. Massive thing in RoboCop. So obviously something that Verhoeven really likes to talk about. But I think we should jump on to Arnie. We got to spend some time talking about
Arnie. I was gonna say.
Like he deserves it. He needs it. He demands our attention. And like we said, this is 1990. We are about 8 years into an era that is largely defined by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Starting in 1982.
First, sorry. Let me just
go
interrupt you for 1 second. I said earlier, I was like, he wasn't like a huge star at this point. He was a massive star. I'm just like,
But you are right. There is an ascendancy.
Huge.
There's a continued ascendancy from this point on.
Yeah.
He is big, but he gets bigger. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, continue, please.
Yeah, no. So we're 8 years in right now, because starting in 1982 with Conan the Barbarian, we begin a run of films that includes Conan the Destroyer, The Terminator, Commando, Raw Deal, Predator, The Running Man, Red Heat, and Twins. And that's 10 films over 8 years that are not lost to history. Like those are all good movies, or at least significant movies. So then you do Total Recall here in 1990, and then the next 10 years he goes Kindergarten Cop, T2, Dave, Last Action Hero, True Lies, Junior, Eraser, Jingle All the Way, Batman and Robin, End of Days, and The 6 Days. And that takes us up to the millennium. And obviously, he continued to make movies well into the 21st century, right up until Terminator Dark Fate in 2019. But forgetting the last 20 years or so, you still have 2 decades of cinema that are just dominated by this man. Like, how does this happen? And why do we love Arnie so much?
He was not in Dave.
Yeah, wasn't he?
He was No, he was not in Dave.
Not in Dave?
Are you talking about you're talking about the Kevin Kline like political comedy, Dave, where he's like
isn't
he? No, I
Isn't
don't
he?
think.
I thought he played a supporting role. No, you know what? Maybe I'm okay. I misquoted. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no, definitely, because you're like,
You know
wait, what?
Yeah. I even surprised myself with that one. Okay, so omitting Dave, but the rest of them I think are accurate, are wholly accurate.
Oh yeah, but but he's like you said, he was on this sort of trajectory of his career, and he just sort of keeps going up and up and up. And then when he sort of plateaus, and then he starts running for office, but he's still sort of like tinkering with some stuff. But like those 2000s and stuff, he's the governor of California, and he's he's finishing the collateral damage, and he's he's not doing as many obviously films. But like but again, Arnold is this type of star that you put in a movie and you're like, you're guaranteed to make X amount of money. You know that you can sell it because people want to see him. He's such a massive, and especially here in the 80s and 90s, like he is the biggest movie star in the world. And partially it comes from he's his bodybuilding background. He has a unique look and stature that nobody can really replicate, right? Nobody can really is on the same level. And that's why you have to make a certain film when you make a film with him, right? So it's like I had mentioned earlier, Total Recall, it's like Cronenberg wanted like William Hurt for the lead of this. And
wow. Way different.
And it's like, yeah, it's just totally different, right? But it also makes it sort of like comedic when he's playing sort of an everyman. This is he's supposed to be sort of an everyman. And it's like this, one of the first scenes in the movie when he leaves the house, he's like out of construction. He's an everyman. He's like working construction. He is absolutely jacked and like going on the jackhammer, and his arms are insane. And you're like, this guy is not an everyman. This guy is a fucking action hero. And like,
and married to a supermodel, just
farthest
thing from an everyman possible.
But I will say, out of all of his sort of like, he plays pretty much the same sort of character. You could kind of say that the Terminator movies, he's just like, the stoic, one-liner sort of robotic. But like, I think this might be one of, if not his best performance. Like he, as much as we joke about him being an everyman and like, come on, I'm an everyman, you got to like help me and whatever. He's like, his facial expressions and his like, there's the scene when we talked about it, the head is kind of blowing up or whatever, and he's getting sort of tortured, and when they're getting sucked out in Mars, like his facial expressions are like insane. And like when he's getting the recall and it's on him and he's like, and he's like, it's like, whoa, he is fucking going for it. There's a difference between that and like, when he was doing Conan and Commando, like, 7, 8, 10 years earlier. He's sort of progressing, and this is like, I think he's really good, man. Some of his and his classic one-liners. He's sort of he's known for them throughout his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
he,
there's
you
no shortage
do
of them in this film.
Ones. No, you do get some choice ones. And yeah, I mean, Arnie has always been, first of all, I just want to clarify, he is in Dave. He plays himself. I just checked into it. That's where I got confused. He plays Arnold Schwarzenegger in Dave. So, just...
it's like a cameo.
Just say, I didn't totally shag that up. But Arnie's always been like this kind of mythic figure for me. Growing up,
yes,
if he was in anything, I was watching it. I absolutely adored Schwarzenegger, and I still do. And look, do I think he's a great actor? Not exactly, but I think he's really great at certain aspects of acting. You talked about it. His yes. Control of his face, his grunts, his groans, and his pangs are like, they're legendary. And when he is in physical distress in a movie, I buy it 100%. And he has charisma, undeniable and overwhelming charisma. And you combine that with an Atlean Olympian physique, the zeitgeist during the rise to his rise to prominence, and you can see why he took over the world. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. And yeah, man, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, Arnie is a one of one, man. He is
100%.
He's made some bangers. Okay, so
and some duds.
Sort of,
hey,
it's
we're none of us perfect.
And some duds. So we're coming up on an hour here. So before we sort of get into our final assessment, if this is a hell of a picture, let's just touch on Philip K. Dick. Somebody I'm not too familiar with. This is the author of as we mentioned earlier, the original story. We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. So what did you want to talk about with Philip K. Dick? Because this is an important sort of note when it comes to this and these ideas that he brings forth and that have kind of translated to other films and other stories, sci-fi stories specifically.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, like you said, we're coming up on an hour here, so we won't dedicate too much time, but I think it behooves us to talk about Philip K. Dick. I was familiar with the name before researching this episode, but I didn't realize how influential his work was and how much of it went on to be really successfully adapted. In addition to Total Recall, you've got Blade Runner, you've got Screamers, Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, The Adjustment Bureau, and the television series The Man in the High Castle. I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, did you know he had that much sort of influence on the industry, posthumously?
No, I mean, I obviously knew about Blade Runner. I knew Minority Report. But yeah, I think what's kind of really interesting is that it's, he was a sci-fi writer in the 60s and like 70s.
Yeah, started late 50s and worked into the 70s, I think. I think he passed away kind of young. He died when he was like 50, but he a couple of decades, like 40 novels, 100 and some odd short stories. The man was prolific for sure.
Yeah, and that's what I find sort of
No, continue, please. I was just going to say, he seems to enjoy exploring a lot of these ideas of identity, the nature of reality, government and corporate control, a lot of which we talked about today and will continue to tackle in the future. And you can see why Verhoeven would be drawn to this guy's work.
Yeah, I mean, just even clicking on his Wikipedia, he's written 44 novels and 121 short stories, and talking about somebody sort of ahead of their time. it's really pretty incredible that, because people are obviously still adapting his work to this day. He died in 1982, so he
82, okay.
Yeah, 82. So he but he was young. He was only 53, like you said. So it's
and married a bunch. Did you see that? Look at all these spouses and like short run marriages he had. It's like married 1959 to 1960, divorced. Married 1960. like he seemed to just sort of like lurch from one failed marriage to the next. And Probably shouldn't laugh
Yeah.
at that. It's probably a symptom of great sadness in his life. I think he had addiction troubles as well, but obviously a really great and troubled artist. But just some incredible
Yeah.
work.
And Minority Report too, which is like, have you seen that at all recently? It's been years
It's been a while.
since I've seen it. Man,
It's been a while, but I remember liking it a lot, and would
oh
be totally. I
man,
mean, we could do a run on Tommy Cruise. I'm down to talk TC all day.
we could also do a run on Spielberg's sort of like sci-fi stuff. You could do Close Encounters, you could do Minority Report, and you could do AI,
or
like
or ET,
yeah,
any of the sort of
ET.
2-letter films. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. TC. We both love TC. We'll get into him at some point for sure. But we want to clue up with Total Recall. This, and we have to figure out if Total Recall is a hell of a picture. That's what we're here discussing. So David, I'll throw to you. Come on and tell me, is Total Recall a hell of a picture?
You slipped into a Gru again there.
I slipped into Gru. Damn it!
A little Gru, little Yakov Smirnoff, maybe. There's a blend of influences.
It's hard keeping Arnie. You know, is it a real thing? Is it a hell of a picture? Yeah.
There's certain phrases, certain words, like I guess, like just syllables, I guess, that sort of take you out of the necessary stricture that you need for Arnie, because you're sort of locked. You got to be locked in with a certain sort of facial feature to do Arnie.
He does. He does say "come on" like 100 times in this movie. Come on, come on.
Yeah, well, because they're always running. They're always running from one place to the next, and he's constantly bringing someone with him. So yeah, he needs to come on. But yes, addressing the question directly of whether or not this is a hell of a picture. Yeah, I think so, man. I love this movie. I've always loved this movie. It maintains really well. The technical aspects of it are just extraordinary. The work that's done here in terms of the monster craft, the makeup, the puppeteers, just absolutely everything they did. I love the ideas. I love Arnie. I can watch this movie. I watched this movie twice for this, and it was like no chore. Like I watched it once, just sort of chilling, and then I watched it again the next morning, taking notes. And yeah, for me, I think this is probably. I'm open to the debate because obviously you've got some other classics in there, but this I think is my favorite Arnie movie. And
wow.
Yeah, I will stand by that. At least, for now, there's a larger discussion to be had there with T2 and, some other classics, but, for the nonce, hell of a picture for sure.
Okay. Now for me, I can't launch us, man. Can't launch us into, No, I'm not turning the key. I'm not launching us to Mars. I'm not, joining us in Recall. Can't call it a hell of a picture. Not because I don't think it's a great movie. Or again, this is the debate that we always have. For me, I think it doesn't hold as the same reverence as other Arnie roles. And other Verhoeven films. And maybe that's just because it's like I said, I saw it years and years and years ago, and I didn't forget about it, but I just sort of I guess I hadn't revisited it as much. Something like Starship Troopers, when that first came out and I saw it, I saw that, I got it on VHS and I rewatched it a ton of times.
Sure.
Like loved Starship Troopers. Terminator 2. I have a really great story about Terminator 2, which I'll save for if and when we do a Terminator 2 episode, but that has,
I think that'll be a win. That's a win.
Yes.
We're doing T2 at some point.
And yeah, I think it's a lot of the film is hokey. I think it works though. And I think, but again, I don't think that it's, one that necessarily for me, holds like a dear place in my heart. It's just sort of this enjoyable film that I'm happy to rewatch again down the line, but like not one that I'm like, oh, I need to kind of rewatch this because it's something that I held dear. Not for me, not Total Recall. But I will say, it's a great piece of sci-fi filmmaking, and
Yes.
I enjoy it for sure.
Okay, no, that's cool
so
because you know what, we haven't had it go this way yet. Yeah. Sorry, I just want to say like we haven't had it go this way yet. Like we've had
wondering this
where we both liked it and where we both dismissed it, and then we've had one where I disagreed with you, where you launched, and now we're having one where I have said yes and you have said no. So that's good. That's good. It's good to have healthy disagreements.
Healthy disagreements. Awesome. Okay, so we've done Total Recall. We've done The Matrix, these mind-bending, reality-based sci-fis. We maybe have one more in the chamber. And Dave, do you want to tell everybody what movie we're going to be talking about next week? What picture?
Yeah, absolutely. And so continuing with the theme of playing with reality, continuing with the secondary theme, which was unintentional but very interesting, of Philip K. Dick adaptations, we are going to be doing Blade Runner, the Ridley Scott, Harrison Ford classic, based on the Philip K. Dick. I'm not sure if it's a short story or novel, but the title is "Do Androids Dream of Mechanical Sheep or Robotic Sheep?" Something like that. We'll clarify that for next week. We'll get on sound footing there. But yeah, another Philip K. Dick adaptation, another movie with just an insane lore behind it. Like people talk about Blade Runner in terms of in tones of great reverence for a lot of reasons. Again, it's very much dealing with what is real and what is not. This time, I think, it's been a little while since I've seen it, but as I recall, it's less about sort of like in The Matrix and Total Recall. Is my whole experience real? It comes down a little more to the personal level. Am I real?
Yes.
And, what constitutes that? And really looking forward to having that discussion and doing it as a part of this larger discussion that we've had with the past two movies.
Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Electric Sheep, thank you.
That's the 68 novel that it's based on. This is my older brother, Bill. This is his favorite movie. And Bill Man loves Blade Runner. Now, he didn't tell us to do this, but I'm just I know he listens, so shout out Bill. And we're doing Blade Runner, but man, it's been a while since I've seen it and I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot written on this movie and there's a lot of discussion around it. We're going to get into a bunch of it. The interesting thing about this is that, this isn't something that Blade Runner isn't a movie that I'm like, I have to rewatch this like every year. Cause it was like, it came out a bit earlier than us. It came out in 82 and we're both in 84. So like by the time we started watching movies, we're like in the 90s, like you said, like the Total Recall even is a bit early for us, but like Terminator 2 really is that's hitting for us, I think, when we're like young kids. So Blade Runner is obviously a picture that we would like have to go back as older teenagers sort of thing.
So we needed someone to introduce us to it, like i.e. the villain, so I mean.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And he introduced me to the film and I think that, it's not one that it's like, oh, I gotta go, like, have nostalgic for this. I have to go rewatch this a bunch of times. It's like, but with that being said, it is a hugely popular and influential film and sci-fi film. And I can't wait to talk about it next week. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so with all that being said, this has been another wonderful, mind-bending, reality-based, dream-sequenced episode of Hell of a Picture. For David Hollingsworth, my name is Andrew Bartlett, and we'll see you all next week for Blade Runner.
Come on.